Hello and welcome to Computer Class. My name is Dave, and today we're talking about HTML classes and IDs. So navigate to W3 Schools and click on their Classes tab, and then we will get started. Now, at first glance, HTML classes look like this. Class equals, and then you can list whatever you want in between the quotation marks. And IDs look the same because it's just an ID, and then in between the quotation marks, you can list whatever you want to entitle the ID. And basically, these two things are used for styling specific elements certain ways, but they look the same. So what's the main difference between a class and an ID? Well, the main difference is that and it says it right here, a class name can be used for multiple HTML elements, whereas an ID must be used for one HTML element within that page, and it cannot be used again on the page. So if you want to reuse your code, then you would want to use a class, which is very helpful for applying some sort of a style set or style block to multiple elements. But if you just want to style something in and of itself, and just that, and then you're done, well, then an ID probably is the best method. And there's other uses for IDs. That's just the opening example there. Okay, so that being said, this is what a class looks like when you put it into a cascading style sheet or CSS document. You would put dot, a period, and then you would list your class name. Now, I know it seems like that you could only write the class name of city here, but you can write any name. You could write Pooh Bear if you want to. It doesn't matter. People usually typically write logical things. So for instance, they would write dot showcase if they were styling the main head section that has all of the opening stuff on their web page, that has your main call to action right as you launch the page. That section dot showcase. If they're styling like their nav section dot nav, they tend to make things very logical when it comes to the naming conventions. So don't just name it like dot city. I think their illustration is actually bad. No one would do that in real life in code. People would actually style something logically. Okay. And so in the following example, they say this: the span element here is it's given a class of dot note, and notice that any span element on the page here, there's two of them, will get the same class applied to it, which is, so if I hit to try it myself here, they're both going to get this style of red text. So that's important to note there. Okay. That being said, the syntax, as I stated, is a period, and then you list whatever you want to. Scrolling on, multiple classes, HTML elements can belong to more than one class, so you can kind of stack classes, which if you get into something called Bootstrap, which is another tab here, haven't taught that yet, but Bootstrap is almost entirely based on classes, and linking to a block of code on a CDN or content delivery network online. So if you would like to see some Bootstrap tutorials, comment down below. I'll work on that. But anyway, needless to say, multiple classes can be assigned to one specific HTML element, which is nice. So here we have the main element is centering, the main class, sorry, is centering the word London, and the other class is giving it the tomato color, making the text white and giving the padding. So again, you could pull from multiple classes if you had to. If you had a class for a certain thing and a class for another thing, you want to use both of them on one element, you can. Different elements can share the same class, as we already stated. Use of the class attribute in JavaScript should be noted, and I'm not teaching JavaScript, but you can access the class feature when you write good JavaScript in your code. The class name can be used by JavaScript to perform certain tasks for specific elements. JavaScript can access certain elements with a specific class name with the getDocumentsByClassName method. And so here it is, getDocumentByClassName. When we do that, here it is applying to the city class, and as a result, we can hide different things. And really what JavaScript does is it changes the HTML elements. It's able to give that versatility. Okay. Moving on to IDs, and I'll just click over to the next tab, all the way back to the top. An ID then is unique, okay? And that's what it says here. Specifies a unique ID for an HTML element. The value of the ID attribute must be unique within the HTML document, okay? The ID attribute is used to point to a specific style declaration in the style sheet. It is used by JavaScript to access and manipulate the element with a specific ID. So again, they keep saying the word specific because it is, you guessed it, specific. But there is a change up to this. So instead of having a dot as the selector in CSS when you're writing good style sheets, you would use a hash symbol, otherwise known as the hashtag symbol, and then you would list your name for your style. I'm sorry, your name for your ID. Okay. So the syntax ID is the hash character, then followed by the ID, then defines the CSS properties within curly braces, and don't forget your curly braces. Obviously, that's good CSS. Okay, I already discussed the difference. Here's where IDs are typically used, and this is where the power of them comes into play here. HTML bookmarks with IDs and links. That's where they're used. If you've ever been to a web page and you click on a button, it's like learn more or discover or click here or some sort of like call to action. You click it and it scrolls further down the page. And usually these are common on one-page websites. But that is because the reason that scrolling effect happens is actually because further down the page on a specific HTML element, they have put an ID. Basically, they've created a page anchor, is what it's called. And what you do is you give the IDs. See, they've done C4 here. And basically, what this is going to do is, now let's hit the try it yourself here. When I click Chapter 4, it's going to scroll down to Chapter 4. If I click Chapter 10, it'll scroll down to Chapter 10. So you can create, as you can see here, you can create specific IDs. Here they have made a link to a page anchor or an ID of this specific chapter so that it will scroll down automatically. And that's what they're used for a lot of times. And then again, you can use ID attributes for JavaScript as well when creating a function here and using the get element by ID method to call to action that specific ID. Okay, so let's actually do it real quick. Let's do a class and an ID. On my desktop, I'm going to create a simple HTML document here. Website.com, you call it whatever you want to. Something to be noted, a little hotkey for creating folders is Control-Shift-N. CSS is usually a folder that's created. Control-Shift-N, JS, Control-Shift-N, IMG, Control-Shift-N, fonts, Control-Shift-N, pages. All right, and then I'm going to open up my program brackets. You could use any code editor you want to. I'm going to press File, New, File, Save As, and save it to my website.com folder as index.html. Pal. So now you notice there's our directory structure, and this is our document. So let's throw over some HTML code, doc type, HTML, nothing we haven't written before. Give ourselves our root elements, HTML, push those apart. Give ourselves a head section. This is the unseen portion of the document, which means it needs a title. Oops. This is a title. Of course, it's a title. Moving on, we got the body section or the seen portion of the document. And a lot of times when people do this, by the way, they also want to throw a style section up here. And again, I talked about this in a different lesson, but if I'm styling a head section, I only have one HTML page. If I'm styling an external style sheet, then obviously I have multiple pages to apply the style to. All right, so let's give an h1 tag. This is a heading. And let's give a paragraph. Okay. Now we want to give a class here is equal to, now let's just give it a random name, heading, right? A logical name. And let's give a ID, okay, to this one and call it paragraph. All right. Now, in order to show you how this positively works, it'd be a good idea to have two headings. Otherwise, you're not going to see the effect of being able to apply a class to multiple elements. All right, so in order to style our class, we do dot heading, and then we do our curly brackets, which again is shift, and then you press the curly bracket symbol. It's right next to the letter P on your keyboard. And let's just give this one a text align feature of center right off the bat. All right, and maybe give it a color of blue. Cool. Oops. Color blue. Don't hit Control Z. Always a bad idea. All right, now we do the hash symbol, and we're going to access our paragraph. Okay. And this is an ID, so it's one per page. We can never make another paragraph name on this page. We can never do it the same class either, so that should be noted. But this is one specifically per page. All right, so let's give this one a color of red, let's just say. All right. Now I'm going to my desktop, double click my index page, and there we have it. We have styled all the headings on the page using classes, and here we have one specific element we have styled red, and that's the paragraph. All right. So that's the difference between classes and IDs. They're incredibly useful, and they really tie in with CSS a lot. If you want to know more about them, learning CSS would be a great topic to study next. Hopefully you learned something today about these specific ideas within HTML. And as always, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next video.